are privileged to have Mrs. Weima Eribo, who is the Director General, Women Chamber of Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture. Please help me celebrate her. We also have Mrs. Imade Bibowe Osubeni. She is the Policy Advisor and Founder, Tech Her Africa. Celebrate her. And we have Dr. Oba Usang. She's a Senior Lecturer at the University of Calabar, Cross River, and also the Suite Coordinator of Calabar Chapter. You are welcome. We have my sister, the National Coordinator of the Association of Nigeria Women Business Network, ANWBN. Please, let's clap and celebrate them. The he for she are Dr. Abraham Aliyu, is a Senior Policy Advisor, African Center for Tax and Governance. He has truly demonstrated that he's very gender sensitive. And my name is Bosede Florence Ikanoba. I'm the National Chairperson of the Society of Women in Taxation. Thank you very much. This session is put together to commemorate the International Women's Day 2024. And of course, we all are aware that the IWD 2024 campaign theme is Inspire Inclusion. And so we want to examine the conversation around the businesses that is done in the informal sector. So in Nigeria, as in many other countries, we are all aware that a significant portion of the economic activity occurs within the informal sector, and women play a very vital role in that sector. They do businesses such as vending and other unregulated enterprises. And within this sector, these women have some challenges that they face every day in the course of their engagement, doing businesses, and trying to earn income to take care of their families. And so, despite the contributions that they are making, these women, they face all manner of challenges that we are going to look at in a short while. So our conversation will center around how best can we address these challenges. We want to examine the intersection of gender and taxation within the informal sector. So we are going to look at some questions. I will just ask some specific questions and respond to it. So I want to start with our sister, Mrs. Weima Eribo. Can you share some insights into the specific challenges that women face since you are the DG, the Women Chamber of Commerce? Can you tell us what specific challenges that you know women face in the informal economy regarding taxation compared to their male counterparts?
Thank you for that question. I think Dr. Osasu had started that conversation in her opening remarks. First of all, we already know that there's a huge gender pay gap. There's already a huge gap in women's access to capital. There's already a huge gap in women's access to economic resources. And then there's also the point where the resources that they need, the structure that they need to be able to run successful businesses almost does not exist. And then you then want that kind of woman to want to pay tax where she's not seeing where her money is going, she's not seeing it do anything for her. There are certain structures that are not in place that are actually even supporting her business in any way. I mean, it's unfair, first of all, to even begin to ask somebody like that to pay taxes for you, for the government. And I think this is really a great conversation because we need to start understanding that by the time you're creating policies, you need to be able to create policies for women where they are. You need to be able to create products and services that meet women where they are. When Imadi was talking, she was talking about, the different, even within the strata of women, there are different sectors within that, right? So you have a woman who is married and has a husband who is supporting her at home with some of the bills. You have a woman who is married and is taking care of all of the bills at home. You have a woman who is a widow who is taking care of all of the kids and her family and her ex-husband's family. So if you look at the different segments of women, even within what we call women, there are so many that exist. So when we start looking at it from then and begin to design policies that actually speak to the needs of these women, so that when it comes to compliance, they are excited to want to comply. If I'm asked to pay taxes and I live in an area where I have 24 hours security, I have 24 hours lights, within the markets there are structures that support me. If I want to get a loan, nobody's asking me to pay 58% of a loan that I haven't even seen, first of all, right? It will encourage me to pay taxes. So while we're looking at the side of women's tax evasion or non-compliance, there's also the other part of it which we have to speak to, which is really what is going to compel them to actually pay taxes. So I think for me it's really just looking at those policies that exist and if they speak to women where they actually are.
Okay, so that's quite noted. Let me also ask Mrs. Ajala, because she is leading over 70 coalition organizations, and I'm sure in the course of your engagement, some of the women would have made some complaints about the challenges they face, similar challenges that they face. So I want to direct the same question to you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much. One of the main things we hear are the double burden of responsibility of handling both a business and household responsibilities. That puts a big pressure on many of the women. Again, you have discriminatory practices of collecting levies. In fact, there was a time we thought of advocating for women tax collectors because the harassment they face, and because they think, women are a weaker sex, not that they think. A man can wrestle you to the ground if it comes to it. A woman will not. So those discriminatory practices were affecting them. They didn't have a voice. They couldn't fight against it. And just like doctor said then, you make 1,000, you go back with minus 500. Then there's limited information. Many of them don't even have information. And I remember one of the outings we had in Uyo, we even talked about having those tax booklets in the various major languages of particular places, and also maybe in audio versions on the radio, so that information in their language, in the way they understand it, will be clear to them. Then, of course, there's the issue of informal documentation. Nothing is documented anywhere. So they don't even know how to document, and that is what is giving rise to even think of setting up information hubs that can support what they're doing.
I'll come back to you. Okay. So can we take the conversation further? Let me now go to our he for she, Dr. Aliu. I want Dr. Aliu to look at that question and also okay. So what have you got to say? How do gender-specific taxation policies impact the economy empowerment and the livelihood of women operating in Nigeria informal economy? I'll take it again. How do gender-specific taxation policies, because ADG talked about creating, policies that will speak, to the needs of the women. Okay, so how will these policies, specific policies, impact the economic empowerment and the livelihood of women operating in Nigeria informal economy?
Thank you very much, and it's an honor sitting among these high-powered women on this very important day. Just like my colleagues have said, we have the issues of access to information, access to education, unpaid, double burden, lack of documentation. These are all barriers. And we all strive for inclusive development. We're talking about development that works for everybody, irrespective of his class, gender, social status. And for this to happen, or for this to be achieved, we will need resources. And so because we need resources, and women also want to be part of that inclusive development, not just what the development gives to them, but how they can also contribute towards achieving that development that they also desire. And so for that, they would like to contribute their own quota towards achieving such very laudable objective. But for that to happen, we need to understand the barriers that is making them not to be able to contribute as much as they will want to. And that is where the issues of understanding the gender disparities that are in our policies, in our laws, and even in the administrative process. So we shouldn't just look at it from the policies, laws, and even the administration. And then have a very broad mindset towards which we can address these issues. And so if you understand those gendered issues that inhibits women, mostly in the informal sector, to comply. Nobody doesn't want to comply, and to just for, like my colleague said, she talks about compel. Probably for better use of word would have been how we can nudge them, find a way of nudging them by allowing them to understand that I understand your challenges. How can we come together to address your challenges? And then so that you can also earn income and then pay a bit of those income towards the general good and inclusiveness of the society that all of us desire.
Thank you very much. You can see that our he for she is speaking the mind of the women. So it's always on the side of the women. Thank you very much. So I want to come to Dr. Oba. Can you give us any successful intervention that can effectively address gender disparities? I know some of them have mentioned them, but from your perspective as a sweet advocate, okay? You are the grassroots in Calabar, and I know you have done quite a lot with women. So can you give us some of those interventions or initiatives that you believe can effectively address gender disparities in taxation within the informal sector? If so, what were the key factors contributing to their success from your experience?
Okay, from our experience in Calabar, we were working on some of our markets, Watt Market, Marion Market, and where we discovered that women were paying as much as 1,800 as levies. Although there are men in the market, but of course, like we've all agreed, women form the most of the population. So what we did in our state, we had a coalition. SWEET is one of them, IBP leading the way, and we had Tax Justice and others. And we met, talked about the matter. We didn't just stop there. We had to look for a member of the House of Assembly, because sometime in 2015, there was this tax harmonization law that was passed in Cross River. But over the years, we discovered it was not being implemented. That law specifically stipulates the various levies that people in the market should pay. But we discovered that it was set aside, and then all kinds of levies, including levy for the wife of the chairman of the market, something like that. So we identified, we discovered there was a member of the House of Assembly, two of them particularly, who were also doing some work in the House of Assembly. So we had to look for them, found somebody who took us to them. We all met, talked about it, and then he told us something. He said, fine, I have heard you, we are doing similar work, we'll support each other, but I want you as a coalition to make some noise. I am in the House of Assembly. I may not be able to go to media to make some noise, but I want you to make some noise on radio, every media platform. And when you do that, some of the stakeholders will hear, while we will reinforce it in the House of Assembly. I'm glad to say that as of 2 days ago, one of our colleagues in Tax Justice sent me a message to say that the levy has been reduced to 300 naira in Mariam Market. So that means for us to achieve this, we cannot work in silos. We must work as a coalition with one aim of making sure that women get some form of equality, fairness as it concerns taxation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want Amade to talk from her own perspective as a policy advisor. And the question is this: how can policymakers and stakeholders work together, even though she has mentioned it, but in specific terms? You know, how would you want them to come together to design and implement gender-responsive taxation policies that you know will support women economic inclusion and empowerment? Because I want you to talk from your own perspective.
And thank you so much for that question. So she has already mentioned a big part of it, which is engagement. As policymakers, we work based on information available to us. And because most times we're not on the field, it's very easy to overlook the nuances, the data, and the evidence. But stakeholders can furnish us with such information that is fact-driven. Because most times when you hear these kinds of conversations, it sounds emotional. It just looks like you guys just want to talk about women all the time. But when we have stakeholders, like she has just said, who bring the data, who bring the evidence and say, look, this is what is happening. These are the implications for Nigeria, for the economy, for your people. I don't think any government wants to create policies to hinder their people. Most times it's the information, like he said, administration, and making it operational. So for both parties, like I said, we as makers, we have to be open to accepting feedback, accepting data, and doing things in the best interest of all Nigerians. As stakeholders, we must put aside emotions and sentiments and clearly say, these are the issues, and these are the impact of those issues. And how can we come together to make these policies? And there's a process around it. We must engage, we must always also review and say, are these policies working? If they're not working, what can be changed? I don't remember any policy or reason that we have gone to review and redefine and rechange. So we must have a process from the policy making stage where we review policies, we check their impact, and we come back to refine based on evidence that we gather. Thank you very much.
So what I hear from you is engagement, collaboration, that is very, very key.
That is data-driven as well.
Yeah, data-driven. You cannot work alone or even do the advocacy all alone by yourself. Now, I want Mrs. Ajala and, of course, our DG, the two of you, to talk to us because resources is very key, you know, for a woman to be able to undertake a successful venture business. She will need resources. So now the question is, how can we ensure that women entrepreneurs in the informal economy have access to adequate resources, including financial education and legal support to navigate taxation challenges effectively? I want two of you to help us throw more light on it.
Okay. We believe that we should step up on financial literacy programs, that will help a lot. Entrepreneurial training. We also think access to resources and legal help, and also maybe having business clinics will also support the work they're doing. We think collaboration, we've said nobody should work in silos, so collaboration with NGOs and community organizations that can take the matter beyond what we're even, you know, just like they came together in Calabar to do, you know, bringing all the relevant stakeholders together to support, that will also help. And we could also advocate for government support programs like subsidies, low interest rate loans, and all that. And putting all that together, we can begin to have a more inclusive informal economy that have most of the women participating in it.
Thank you very much.
I mean, she said it, but I'll just add one or two things. I think one of the things that will come very handy will also be technical assistance to these women, right? There's so much conversation around general entrepreneurship training. We even now have conversations around, you know, a lot of conversations around financial literacy. But who is really holding their hands? What they've done is fantastic, right? So are we going to get to the point where, you know, there's actually technical assistance that can actually sit down with these women and put them through XYZ, this is what you are supposed to pay, this is how much you earn, this is what you are supposed to do, this is what tax does for you, in that is, and I think one of the things that is also important to me is, in fact, 2 days ago I was with a law firm, and one of the things we're trying to do is actually get free legal counsel for women in business. Because even when you're going into agreements, you're going into partnerships, a lot of us sign documents that we don't understand, right? So are we getting to that point where technical assistance also begins to see legal assistance free of charge? Because sometimes even the lawyers, the bills, you can't even afford it, right? So we need to start getting to the point where, just like Madam has said, we're all working together, but in that, there's all of the services that actually just really come to hand-holding for these women to ensure that they understand taxation, they understand what is in it for them, and then really just working together to ensure that they have that support that they need.
Okay. Thank you very much. Before we go to the audience, I know some of them will have some questions. I just want to throw this up again to Imade. Are there any potential unintended consequences, that you think may come up in implementing gender-specific taxation reforms in the informal economy?
Yeah, thank you very much. So it's very clear in this instance. If you do policies that favor women, after a while, men will start to suffer. And once that happens again, we'll go back to gender equality again, because it's not just about women, it's also men and women. So we must be careful to use evidence to say, right now, who are those that are most affected, and then fix that issue. And then the policy cannot be static. We must keep reviewing and seeing, are the imbalances reducing? And when it does, how do we refine these policies to make it moderated? So that's the most significant one, when we now favor women over men. And there's now a whole domestic issue around that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. As a he for she that is very gender sensitive, what would you think that the men, for instance, will likely pick as as holes or faults in formulating some of these policies?
I think I wouldn't think men or any rational person will pick faults. It depends on the evidence that is available and how convincing those evidences are. And so it's not biased, it's not emotional, but it's something, but as I said, it's for the general welfare of society. I think one of the biggest mistakes, and I want to put it here, one of the biggest mistakes we do when it comes to taxation is that we see taxation as just a means of raising money. It isn't. Taxation is a tool that it's supposed to fix the inequalities in a system. And so when you're doing collection and you have adequate data that are well segmented, well disaggregated, and it gives you a very comprehensive insight into which sector is doing well, who is paying taxes, who was paying taxes properly before but this year is not paying well. Why are women in this sector not paying taxes or not complying properly? And then it's giving you that something is wrong, and then you need to intervene. And so when even the women groups' rights want to engage, you don't just engage and saying we need, women has this. You tell me, for me, I will expect you to say, okay, if you give us these grants, this, in the long run, if you empower us and we're able to build in the long run, this is the amount of taxes that women will come from. So we're saying that there's a cost and benefit to it. If you give us 5 million naira that is well properly put into the, allocated to these informal sector women, and we're able to build up, and give them a relief for like 2 years, over the course of 3 years, which is how much of money we'll be able to generate. And that is now, you're now saying, give us this thing, we'll give these things. But when you not say, evidence shows this happened, give us this, and we don't tell me what is going to be there. And as I said in the beginning, it's an inclusive development, and everybody must contribute to it. But we must understand, we must handhold each other, and then that way, each of us can lift each other up.
Thank you so very much. So the last question, before we invite members of the audience, is to my sister, Dr. Oba. Looking ahead, what are some key priorities and actions that stakeholders should focus on to advance gender equality and women empowerment in Nigeria informal sector? those key priorities that you think should be in place?
Okay, first of all, we need to look at who are the stakeholders. For me, the major stakeholder here is the government, who makes this policy. And for the government to be able to bring up policies that will address some of those things, the very first thing they need to do is to look into our current tax laws and remove every bias, every disparity against the gender, particularly women. Whatever will limit a woman's earning power in our tax laws or any other law we have in the country needs to be removed. Because you and I, you will agree with me that there are certain organizations you go to work, they will pay the man differently because he's a man, and they will pay you differently because they think you don't have so much maybe physical strength or even mental strength to undertake certain tasks. So whatever will lead to the removal of such biases will be good in our policy development and implementation processes. And then there will be need to also, if you want to have an inclusive tax policy, for example, then the committee or whatever you set up to do that must be inclusive in terms of gender too. So that at the end of the day, we'll have tax policies that are gender inclusive. There should be women there, there should be men there, so that everybody's interest is well represented. So that at the end of the day, whatever we are having as an output in terms of tax policy will address some of the biases and the disparities we've all identified. That way, I think going forward, we may likely have something, a tax policy that will be gender inclusive and friendly and equitable for all.
Thank you so very much. You all agree with me that they have spoken excessively, you know, and throw up even further questions that require further answers. But nevertheless, we are all in agreement that that the government or the stakeholder generally, that is the government, should remove every form of biases, every form of barriers that will limit the economic power of especially the women, okay? And that, what I hear again is that if you are formulating policies, the people that are affected by those policies should also be part of the committee that need to have that discussion, that engagement concerning those policies that you are formulating. So I want to request before we appreciate the panelists. I don't know whether some of us have questions or comments that you want. Okay, the men, it appears the men are the ones that want to ask us questions. So Mr. Muna, okay. How many, who is the second person? Okay, thank you. So that's 1, 2, 3. We'll take it in that order. First, Muna, second, then third. So if you have anybody specific that you want to answer, you can.
Okay, so I want to thank everybody that has spoken so far. And for me, it's drawing from all the points that have been made. I think those points are really cogent. And if we put them together, it's basically just saying that, you know, there's a need for us to collectivize efforts towards advocacy. And it's not advocacy that is going to be driven strictly by civil society. It's something that has to be collectively done, even particularly by the people that are most affected, right? And unfortunately, there is, as we have been able to identify, an information gap. You know, they're not well sensitized on the issues. As much as they feel those issues, sometimes they are unable to articulate them properly. They even lack the evidence to, you know, justify their arguments. So it's a responsibility that lies on our own side, right, as probably a more structured aspect of society, to first of all, just like we all mentioned here, establish that evidence base. Because a lot of times, if you're throwing these conversations to tax administrators, one of the major responses you get is, where's the evidence that you're using to, you know, that justifies your statements? So we need something really comprehensive. It's not enough for us to just have these perceptive, you know, opinions. I was just looking through a research with Chika today that was done by the Zambian Revenue Authority. And it's probably the most comprehensive gender disaggregated data I've seen on taxation. It's the kind of thing that we should look to collectively commission. If there's an opportunity for us to work together, develop a proper terms of reference, engage consultants for a broad field study, right? And then when we have that, it's not just for us. Of course, we are going to use that to justify our arguments. But like I said, it's more important that the people who are most affected by these taxes, take on that conversation, that they have the agency. So we now start looking at how we can simplify the information, localize, whatever form, and widely disseminate and sensitize them properly so that we have that critical mass of citizens demanding from a very informed position. And we have the evidence that establishes the arguments we are making, and it's well amplified.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. Well said. Before we take on the second question, some form of inquiries that have been made, for instance, in other clime, we understand that, for instance, in India, that they have some policies in place that favor women, in such circumstances that they give preference to women in terms of the taxes that they pay. They don't pay the same tax as much as the men do. So I don't know whether that is still in place, but it was some research work that was done, and some persons came up with that and said, if it happens in India, why can it not happen in Nigeria? And I think we have to look it up, and in the course of advocacy, and see how we can gather some of this information so that we can make it at a reference point and say this happens, in so place. So why can it not happen in Nigeria? Thank you very much. Can we have the second question, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patience Madleon. I'm the CEO of Shadrach Madleon's Foundation and also the convener of Aware My Scars. I bring you greetings from over 24,000 women of Aware My Scars. Mine is more of an appeal, not a question now. Appeal in the sense that we women are, whether we like it or not, marginalized in every aspect. And so most women are willing to pay these taxes, no matter how much is levied, but they want that their taxes count for something. So we're going back to the stakeholders now, the government that place this tax on the women, or the policy, that creates these policies, what are they doing with these taxes? What are they doing with this money that is being levied on people? And unfortunately, most times they are levied double in different aspects. You're paying tax here, you're going to pay tax here. Tax is good. Tax is what the government is supposed to use to create succor, create development for the people. But these women are seeing that they're taking their money from them and nothing is happening. So how do you now begin to tell me to pay these taxes? If I have my way, I will evade it definitely, because I'm not seeing anything that is counting for these taxes, this money that I am paying. So while we're working on the policies and working on how to make it a little bit gender sensitive, we should also talk to the stakeholders to do something with these taxes that has been levied on people with the hardship that they're already experiencing, so that I can easily want to pay my tax and become a good citizen that I'm supposed to be.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you. Okay, is yours a question or a comment too? Okay.
Thank you very much. I really want to commend our people that discussed this afternoon. They really spoke the main thing that our heart desired. I want to agree with Prof when he mentioned that taxation should not be seen as a way of raising funds to government, but rather it goes beyond that. There is something that happens when all these policies are being made. Because if you look at the Finance Act, you will see that there is always a lot of changes going on the Finance Act, which are not supposed to be because of non-inclusivity of different sectors. So I agree with Dr. Barr that once ever policies are being made, there must be inclusiveness of all the different parties, because who wears the shoes know where it pinches him or her. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Do we still have comments? Any question? Okay. I think we have done very well. And on behalf of NESG, PIC, IBP, we want to really appreciate you for your contributions. But in addition, I want to say that we have started the conversation already. And Imade said it's collaboration and it's engagement. And incidentally, the Society of Women in Taxation is having a tax summit on March 19. And these are some of the things that we want to throw out to the public. We are inviting tax policy experts. We are inviting the government. We are inviting the market women, those who are feeling the pinch. We are asking them to come so that we can have this conversation further and know what to do. And all of this will be documented so that together we can now take it up and give it to the government to say this is what the women are saying. And I believe that if we have more of these engagements, you know, it will be easier to channel our views to tasks that matter. You know, one of the things we learned when we were doing, interest, when you are mapping power and interest, there are people that you need to talk to. They are important, you know, in decision making. You cannot just ignore them. So the government is very important. So even if we sit down all day and do all the talking, and you don't hear their views, or they don't make their own inputs know why they are doing this, you know, we go nowhere. So it is important that we collaborate as professional women bodies, as women entrepreneurs, and also the government that is at the center of it all. So I want to thank you so very much. I don't know, on the closing, we have a closing thought. I'll just give you 1 minute to just round up. Thank you. Starting from Imadi.
So my closing thought is really simple. It's for us to remember that it's inclusion. And inclusion doesn't mean women, it means men and women. So we must have that mindset that it's inclusion, and whatever we do, we must make sure that everybody's interest is represented on the table, and create policies that serve all and not just a single gender. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I would want to wrap up by really just horse riding on what he said. I don't think we should leave this place without actually constituting a working group to actually get that, you know, what he was talking about, the thing that happened in Gambia. We have quality organizations who are well represented here, and I think before this event finally ends, it should be identified 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people are going to start work on this, so that it doesn't become one of those conversations or one of those events where we just talk and nothing really comes out of it. So I mean, we should leave here with something concrete to say this is what we're doing. This is a map that we can use to set out to what we want to achieve, and really just work from there.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Mrs. Ajala.
As a rider to that, I was going to talk about engagement. There's no way we can do anything without engaging the right stakeholders. And so engagement is very key in everything we're doing. Engagement with all the relevant people. And that engagement will now start with the working group. I think we're starting straight away. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My own contribution is just to also ride on what one of the participants mentioned. In as much as we should be interested in gender-based taxation, we should also be interested in gender-based planning and gender-responsive budgeting. It's important that every year when the national budget comes out, you need to look at whether it is responsive to gender. That way you will know whether what you're paying is actually, and so you can have two-way conversations to say, if we are paying this amount of money, I want it to reflect in the national plan and also reflect in the budget. And that way you can have a lot of conviction. Then you can also begin to talk National Assembly members to understand that budgeting is just about putting figures and allocating resources. It also has to meet specific needs of individual. And then we can have this conversation even across different states. So you can have a lot of coalition that we need. Okay. That's my contribution.
Okay, I think in addition, we also talked about capacity building yesterday, that you need to build the capacity of those that have to even implement some of these policies. Thank you very much. Dr. Oba.
So for my closing remarks, we should remember in our coalitions and advocacy towards inclusivity in taxation and what concerns women, we should remember that we need evidence-based data. Without data, we will just be making noise. So while we do all that, let's ensure that we collect the right data so that when we are speaking, we'll be speaking from the point of strength and the evidence are clear and nobody can deny it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so very much. So what do we say to this panel? So a good power clap. Can we do it much better than that? Another one? Thank you so very much. It's a pleasure to have you.